I want you to do something for me. Just a little mental exercise.
Okay.
Imagine you're walking into your closet right now. You push aside the shirts you wear all the time, the jeans that fit just right, and you get to the back.
I'm with you.
And there, hanging in the shadows, is a coat. Maybe it's a heavy winter coat you haven't worn in, I don't know, 2 years.
We all have one of those.
Right. Or maybe it's a suit that's a little too formal for your current job. It's clean. It's probably expensive. And here's the key. You paid for it. It is yours.
It's a familiar scene, definitely.
Okay. Now, imagine someone, let's say a total stranger, walks into your bedroom, opens your closet, points a finger at that coat, and tells you that you are, right now, actively committing a crime.
A crime.
A crime. Not that you should donate it.
Yeah.
That's not that it would be a nice thing to do. But that by keeping that coat hanging there, you are stealing it. You're a thief.
Wow. That's an accusation that just stops you in your tracks. It feels invasive. It feels completely wrong.
Exactly. My immediate reaction is, excuse me, I worked for that. I paid taxes on that. I have the receipt. But what if I told you that this accusation isn't coming from some radical political activist or out of a communist manifesto?
Okay.
What if I told you this is the standard historical and highly intellectual teaching of the absolute heavyweights of history? We're talking about the saints and doctors of the church.
And that is exactly where we're going today. And I'm actually glad you had that defensive reaction because, well, honestly, that's the only honest way to start this conversation.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we're stripping away all the comfort of modern financial advice. We're not looking at crypto. We are not talking about the S&P 500. We're asking a question that sounds simple, but, well, it might just ruin your afternoon.
In the best possible way.
In the best way. We are asking, ¿Qué dicen los santos y doctores de la iglesia sobre el dinero? What do the saints and doctors of the church actually say about money?
And just to be crystal clear for everyone listening, this is not the prosperity gospel.
Thank good.
We are not going to tell you that if you just pray hard enough, God is going to drop a Mercedes in your driveway.
Yes.
In fact, we're pretty much doing the exact opposite. We're looking at a stack of sources that includes giants like St. Augustine, the Golden Mouth himself, St. John Chrysostom, St. Basil the Great, St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Ambrose.
And that's just the early guys.
Right. We're moving all the way up to modern figures. Yeah. People like St. Josemaria Escrivá and even Pope John Paul II.
It's a formidable lineup.
Yeah.
And I have to say, reading through these texts, it is intense. We usually think of saints as these sort of gentle stained glass figures who say, be kind, give $1 to the charity bucket.
Sure.
But these guys, they sound like they want to burn the whole system down.
They do. And that's because they aren't really interested in making you comfortable. They're interested in reality. And the core tension we see across all these sources, it isn't about whether money is useful. I mean, St. Thomas Aquinas is very practical. He knows you need to eat. The tension is about what money does to the, let's call it the architecture of the human soul. They present money as a tool, yes, but also as like a radioactive material.
That's a great way to put it.
It's useful, but if you don't handle it with extreme protection, it will poison you.
That is the exact vibe I got. It's like a spiritual investment strategy, but the risk assessment is just off the charts. So if you're listening and you've ever felt that low-level anxiety about your savings, or if you've ever wondered how much is too much, or even if you just wanted to know why a 4th century bishop would call you a thief for owning 2 coats,
then you're in the right place.
Stay with us. We are going to unpack the diagnosis, the psychology, and maybe even the cure.
So let's start with that diagnosis.
Okay, let's get right into it. I think the most common phrase people know, even if they aren't religious at all, is money is the root of all evil. It's a total cliche at this point. So is that the verdict? Is it physical cash in my wallet? Is it actually evil?
If we look at someone like St. Augustine, the answer is a very definitive, very hard no. But to understand why, we have to get just a little bit philosophical for a second.
Okay.
Augustine has this concept called privatio boni.
Privatio boni. So privation of good, a lack of good.
Exactly. Augustine argues that evil isn't a substance. It's not a thing that God created. Evil is just a lack of good, or maybe a twisting of good. So gold, good, silver, good, the ability to trade and build economies, all of it, fundamentally good.
Because they're creations of God.
They're creations of God. If they were inherently evil, God wouldn't have made them in the first place.
Okay, so I'm off the hook. My bank account isn't evil.
Phew.
Not so fast. Augustine argues that while the thing itself is good, the order of our love for it can be profoundly evil.
The order of love. What do you mean by that?
Well, he talks about a hierarchy of goods. God is at the very top. People, human souls are next. And material things. They're way down at the bottom.
Okay, that makes sense. The evil happens when you flip that ladder upside down. When you love gold more than you love justice, or when you love your bank account more than your neighbor who's starving, you've broken the very structure of reality.
It's like using a Picasso painting as a doormat. The painting is good, the floor is good, but the arrangement is a complete disaster.
That is a perfect analogy. The sin isn't in the gold, it's in the avarice. The greed in the human heart that completely disorders our love. And to prove this, the sources bring up a really fascinating comparison between two biblical figures, Job and the rich man, who's often called Dives, from the parable of Lazarus.
I remember the story of Job. He had everything, right?
Job was basically the Bill Gates of the Old Testament. I mean, immense herds, servants, gold, land. He was unbelievably wealthy. But the text calls him blameless and upright.
So how does that work? How can he be sitting on a giant pile of cash and still be considered blameless?
It's because of what happened when he lost it all. You know the story. Job loses everything, his kids, his wealth, his health, all in a single catastrophe.
Right.
His reaction is the key. He says, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." St. John Chrysostom comments on this and says that Job was poor in spirit even when he was rich in currency. He held the wealth in his open hand, you see, not in a clenched fist.
Okay, I see that. So contrast that with the rich man, Dives.
Dives is the guy in the parable who feasts like a king every single day, while Lazarus, a beggar covered in sores, is starving at his front gate. Dives dies and goes to, well, let's just say the bad place. But here's the nuance, and it's so important. Augustine points out that Dives wasn't punished simply because he was rich. I mean, Abraham, who is in heaven in that same story, was also incredibly rich.
Oh, that's a good point.
Dives was punished because of his pride and his complete lack of pity. He was attached. He saw Lazarus not as a human being, but as part of the scenery and inconvenience.
So theoretically, then, you can be rich and holy. It's actually possible.
Theoretically, yes. But, and this is a massive but, that St. Thomas Aquinas just hammers home. It is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. It's like saying, theoretically, you can handle plutonium without a hazmat suit.
Right.
I mean, sure, if you're incredibly careful and know exactly what you're doing, but the odds are just not in your favor.
Aquinas actually uses a specific metaphor that I found really, really visceral. He and St. Gregory the Great compare riches to thorns.
Yes. Spinous. Thorns.
Which feels a little dramatic. I mean, my direct deposit doesn't feel like a thorn. It feels like safety. It feels like a cushion. So why thorns?
Well, Aquinas is commenting on the parable of the sower, you know, where the seeds fall among thorns and get choked out. But being Aquinas, he can't just leave it at that. He has to break it down systematically.
Of course.
He gives 3 specific reasons why riches are like thorns, and honestly, they map perfectly onto modern psychological research about wealth and anxiety.
Okay, let's walk through them. What's the first thorn?
The first thorn is the anxiety of acquisition. Aquinas says thorns prick you when you try to grab them. Just think about the stress of trying to get rich.
A hustle.
The side hustles, the overtime, the fear of missing out, the competitive jealousy. You're being pricked and scratched before you even have the money in your hand.
That is definitely relatable. The whole grind culture, it's painful. You're literally bleeding time and energy and relationships just to get a grip on the thing.
Exactly. Now, the second thorn is maybe even more interesting. He says, thorns bloody your hands when you try to hold onto them tight. This represents the anxiety of preservation.
The fear of losing it all.
Yes. Once you have the wealth, the nature of your anxiety completely shifts. Now you're terrified of the market crashing. You're worried about inflation. You're worried about theft. You're worried about getting sued. You have to build walls, hire lawyers, check the stock ticker every 10 minutes. You're squeezing this thing, and the tighter you squeeze, the more it digs into your skin.
It's the idea that you don't really own the thorns. The thorns sort of embrace you. They own you.
Yes. And what's the third thorn?
The third is that thorns choke the plants growing around them. Wealth chokes the seed of the word. This is the opportunity cost, isn't it?
Precisely. If your mental bandwidth is, say, 90% occupied with managing your assets, protecting your status, and planning your next big purchase, what's left for the spiritual life, for your family, for just being?
Nothing. You're suffocated.
You become a bonsai tree that could have been a mighty oak, but you were choked out by the underbrush of your own stuff.
This leads us directly into the psychology of greed then. Because it's not just about the money sitting in an account. It's about what it does to your head. And St. John Chrysostom is, well, he's just incredible on this. He does not pull any punches.
He really, really doesn't. He has this psychological profile of the greedy person that feels like it was written by a modern therapist or maybe a really shark satirist.
He uses this funambulist metaphor. I have to admit, I had to look that word up.
It's a great word. It means a tightrope walker.
Right. So paint the picture for us. Why is a rich person like a tightrope walker?
Okay, so Chrysostom asks us to imagine a man walking on a thin rope way up high in the air. This man has to be perfectly balanced. Every single muscle is tense. He can't look around and enjoy the beautiful view. He has to stare at the rope. He can't relax for even a second.
Because if he does...
If he slips just a little bit, he falls to his ruin. Chrysostom argues that the rich man lives in this constant state of precarious balance. A shift in political favor, a change in the economy, a sudden illness, and the whole lifestyle, the whole identity collapses. The anxiety of just maintaining that high position is exhausting.
And you have to contrast that with the person on the ground.
Exactly. The person on the ground, the person who's attached or lives simply, they can trip, sure. But when they trip, they just skin a knee.
They get up and dust themselves off.
They get up, they dust themselves off, they move on, they don't plummet to their death. Chrysostom is asking a very pointed question. Why would you choose to live your life on a tightrope? Why would you choose that constant vertigo?
It's a compelling image because wealth so often feels like stability. We think, if I just have $1 million, then I'll be safe. Chrysostom is saying, no, if you have $1 million, you're now walking on a wire.
And the higher you go, the thinner the air gets, and the further you have to fall.
There's another image from the sources that really stuck with me. It's the image of the dog and the chain. This one felt, I don't know, degrading almost.
It's meant to be. It's a brutal, brutal critique of avarice. The source describes the miser, the person who just hoards money, not as the master of his money, but as its slave.
How does that work? How so?
Think of a guard dog that's chained to a treasure chest. The dog barks ferociously at anyone who comes near. It's aggressive, it's anxious, it probably doesn't sleep well. But can the dog open the chest and buy itself a nice steak?
No, of course not.
No, the dog is just guarding it.
Guarding it for who?
For others. For the heirs who are just waiting for him to die, for the government to take its cut in taxes, or for thieves to break in. The miser suffers all the anxiety of the owner but gets none of the actual utility. He's a slave in his own house, chained to a pile of metal that he can't even eat.
That connects directly to St. Basil's observation about thirst. I think this explains the just a little bit more phenomenon we all see.
Yes. Basil uses a physiological metaphor. He says that the desire for wealth works like dropsy, or in more modern terms, it's like drinking salt water.
Which is completely counterintuitive.
Right. If you're thirsty and you drink fresh water, your thirst is quenched. The mechanism works as intended. You stop drinking. But if you're stranded at sea and you drink salt water,
it makes you thirstier.
The salt actually dehydrates your cells further, which triggers an even stronger thirst signal from your brain, so you drink more salt water, which makes you even thirstier.
It's a terrifying feedback loop.
It's a death spiral. And Basil argues that wealth is spiritually salty. The more you get, the more you feel you need just to maintain your baseline. You get the boat, now you need the slip fees and the maintenance. You get the big house, now you need the staff and higher property taxes. You never, ever reach enough because you're trying to fill a spiritual void with a material substance.
It's an ontological mismatch. It's like trying to fill a bucket with light.
Exactly. Just passes right through and you're left just as empty as before, but now with more anxiety.
Before we move on, I want to touch on the moth and rust concept.
Yeah.
We hear this phrase from the Gospels, but the saints, they take it very, very literally.
They do. In the ancient world, wealth was often biological. It was grain in a silo, it was wool coats, it was silk. If you hoarded it, nature would come for it. It was inevitable.
Right.
Moths would literally eat the coats. The grain would get moldy. The coins would tarnish and rust.
And today, we look at that and we say, well, my wealth is digital. It's in the cloud. Moths can't eat Bitcoin.
True. But St. Augustine would likely argue that inflation is just a mathematical moth. A market crash is just digital rust. The principle of entropy always applies. You're constantly fighting a losing battle against the natural decay of the universe.
That's a great point.
Augustine asks a very practical, almost business-like question. Why are you storing your wealth in a place where it naturally rots? He's pointing out the absolute stupidity of the investment strategy. You're betting against physics.
So we've established that money isn't evil in itself, but the love of it is a form of slavery, it's a source of anxiety, and it's destined for eventual decay. But now we get to the part that actually made me gasp when I read it. This is section 3, the social mortgage, the idea that it's not actually yours.
This is where St. Basil the Great and St. Ambrose dropped the hammer. And I just want to warn the listener, this is going to sound radical, it might even sound like Marxism, but these men were writing 1,500 years before Marx was even born.
Let's look at that quote from St. Basil. We started the show with the image of the coat. Here's the actual text.
Basil preaches this in a sermon. He says, "The coat hanging unused in your closet belongs to the naked man. The shoes rotting in your house belong to the barefoot man. The money you have buried in the ground belongs to the destitute."
Okay, I have to push back here. Belongs to, that's the legal term. I bought the coat. I worked my 9 to 5. I saved the money. I swiped my credit card. In what possible reality does that coat belong to a stranger I've never even met?
That is the modern capitalist objection, and it's perfectly valid in our civil legal system. But Basil isn't talking about civil law. He's talking about divine law and the fundamental nature of reality. He's operating on what's called the common good principle.
Okay, unpack that for us. What does that mean?
The theological foundation here is that God created the earth and all its resources for everyone.
For all of humanity?
For all of humanity. The fruits of the earth are meant to sustain all human life. Now, the church does teach that private property is a valid institution. We need it for social order. If everyone owned everything, nobody would take care of anything.
Right, the tragedy of the commons.
Exactly. But, and this is the absolute key, the right to private property is secondary to the universal destination of goods.
Secondary.
Yes, your right to own property is not absolute. It has a social mortgage on it. And the mortgage is the fundamental need of your neighbor. Basil is arguing that the purpose of a coat, its very nature, its telos, is to keep a human being warm. If that coat is hanging in a dark closet doing nothing while a man is shivering to death outside, you are violating the nature of the coat. You are holding it hostage from its true purpose.
So my right to have a second coat,
Yeah.
a backup coat, is less important than someone else's right to have even one coat.
In the eyes of these saints, yes, absolutely. They call this superfluous wealth. Anything you have beyond what you need for a dignified life, and dignified allows for your station in life, doesn't mean you have to live in a shack, but anything beyond that distinct need, it effectively belongs to the poor.
This completely changes the definition of charity versus justice. I think most of us think, okay, I made my money, and out of the goodness of my heart, I'm going to give 5% to the poor. Aren't I a nice person?
Right. We want a pat on the back. We see it as being generous. But St. Gregory the Great just completely shuts that down. He says, when we give to the poor, we are not making a gift of what is ours. We are giving back what is theirs.
Wow. We're paying a debt.
It's a debt of justice. Imagine you found a wallet on the street. It has an ID in it. If you track down the owner and return that wallet, are you being charitable? Are you some great philanthropist?
No, I'm just not being a thief. I'm doing the baseline decent thing.
Exactly. And that is how St. Gregory views our surplus wealth. We are holding the wallet of the poor. Giving it back is the bare minimum requirement of justice. If you keep it, you are stealing.
There's a story about St. Ambrose that I think we need to tell in full detail because it just illustrates this perfectly. He wasn't just a writer. He was a bishop in Milan with real power.
This is one of the most dramatic moments in early church history. You have to picture the scene. It's the late 4th century. The Goths have just raided the region. They have taken hundreds of captives, men, women, children, and they're demanding a huge ransom. If the ransom isn't paid, these people will be enslaved for life or just executed.
And the church is really the only institution with any money, right?
Well, the church had wealth, but it wasn't liquid cash. It was in the form of sacred vessels, gold chalices, silver plates. These were vessels that had been consecrated for the Eucharist. They were the holiest objects in the entire city. You didn't touch them unless you were a priest performing the liturgy.
So Ambrose is staring at a massive crisis. He has human beings in chains on one side, and he has gold on the altar on the other.
And he makes a choice that absolutely shocked the world. He orders the sacred vessels to be brought out. He calls for the smelters, and he melts them down. He turns the sacred chalices into gold ingots to pay the ransom.
People must have lost their minds. That's sacrilege.
Oh, they did. The Arians, who were his political and theological enemies, went crazy. They accused him of desecrating the altar, of looting the church. But Ambrose's defense was so profound, and it echoes through the centuries. He said, quite simply, "It is better to preserve living souls for the Lord than gold medals."
That is an absolute mic drop moment.
He argued that the gold chalice is meant to hold the blood of Christ, but the poor person, the captive, is the body of Christ. He said, "The Lord who died without gold can surely form a church without gold." He prioritized the living temple over the material temple.
It reminds me so much of St. John Chrysostom's critique of church architecture. He was preaching in Constantinople, right? The richest city in the world at the time.
Yes, the heart of the empire.
And he would look at these magnificent cathedrals being built and say, what?
He would say, "You adorn the walls of the church with marble and gold. You put silk blankets on the horses of your chariots, while Christ in the person of the poor man stands outside your door, starving and naked." He wasn't against beauty. He was against beauty at the expense of fundamental human justice. He's basically saying, don't bring God a golden cup if you ignored God starving in the street on your way to church.
Okay, I could hear the listener, and frankly, I can hear myself, coming up with the ultimate excuse. It's the responsible parent defense. I say, look, I get it, but I'm not hoarding this for me. I'm saving it for my children. I want them to be secure. I want to leave them a legacy. That feels like a virtue, not a vice.
It feels incredibly virtuous. It feels like the definition of love and responsibility. But St. Augustine hears that excuse and he tears it to shreds.
He doesn't buy it.
Not for 1 second. Augustine points out the logical absurdity of the cycle. He says, your father saved it for you. You are saving it for your children. Your children will save it for their children.
It's a bucket brigade where nobody ever actually puts out the fire.
Exactly. It's a perpetual postponement of generosity. Augustine asks the hard question. Why is everyone saving and no one is giving? He argues that by hoarding it for the kids, you are actually teaching your children that their ultimate security comes from gold, not from God. You're transmitting the disease of avarice to the next generation.
Wow, that's a harsh take. He's saying we're actually teaching our kids to be idolaters with our financial planning.
He suggests that the best inheritance you can leave your child is a clear conscience and the example of a generous life. He asks, why do you not give it to the one who created both you and your children? He implies that God can take far better care of your kids than your trust fund ever could.
Which brings us to the solution. So we've diagnosed the problem. Money creates these thorns of anxiety. We've realized the moral debt. We're holding the poor's money. Now the sources offer what I call the heavenly investment strategy. And they really do treat it like a financial transaction.
They absolutely do. St. John Chrysostom and St. Augustine sound like hedge fund managers here. They're talking about exchange rates, transfer fees, and guaranteed yields.
The basic concept is that old adage. You can't take it with you. We've all seen a hearse. There's never a U-Haul trailer hitched to the back of it.
Right. The coffin has no pockets. But the saints add a brilliant twist to this. They say, you can't take it with you, but you can send it ahead.
Explain that mechanism. How exactly do you wire transfer money to the afterlife?
Augustine uses the analogy of moving to a new country. Imagine you live in the U.S. and you're moving to, I don't know, a country that doesn't accept U.S. dollars at all. If you keep all your wealth in dollars, when you get off the plane, you're destitute. Your money is just worthless paper.
So any smart traveler would convert their currency before they take the trip.
Of course. And Augustine says almsgiving is the currency exchange. When you give money to the poor, you are effectively depositing it in the bank of heaven. You are converting earthly currency, which is subject to inflation, theft, and rot, into eternal currency, which is stable and everlasting.
St. Robert Bellarmine actually cites a specific guaranteed yield on this investment.
He does. He's commenting on Matthew 19, where Jesus promises a 100-fold return on anything given up for the kingdom. Bellarmine analyzes this like it's a commercial deal. He says this is the only investment in existence with a guaranteed 10,000% return.
I mean, if a guy in a suit walked into this room and said, give me $100 and I personally guarantee I'll give you $10,000 back in 20 years, I'd find the money. I'd borrow it if I had to.
You'd be a fool not to. And Bellarmine asks the obvious question. Why do we trust a human banker with our life savings, but we don't trust God with our surplus? It reveals a fundamental lack of faith. We believe the stock market is real. We're not quite sure if heaven's accounting department is real.
Chrysostom even calls this holy usury.
Yeah.
Which is funny because usually usury charging high interest is a sin.
Right, but here he completely flips it. He says God is a good paymaster. God wants to pay high interest. He says give God the small things, earthly coins, a piece of bread, a cup of water, an old coat, and receive the great things, eternal life, peace, joy. It's a mercantile approach to sanctity.
Yeah.
You're making the deal of a lifetime with God.
It's interesting because we often think of spirituality as something wispy and abstract, you know, like meditation and clouds. But this is incredibly transactional in a very concrete way.
It is, but the transaction is based on a relationship of trust. Augustine addresses the fear of loss, that thorns, feeling again. We're scared to give because what if we need it later? And Austin just pleads, why do you hide your money under a stone where a thief can steal it? Put it in the hand of the poor where Christ guards it.
The poor man's hand is the safest deposit box in the universe.
Because of the identification. What you did to the least of these, you did to me. When you put money in the poor man's hand, you are literally handing it to Christ for safekeeping. And Christ, he argues, doesn't lose deposits.
Okay, so we have the theory. The theology is, well, it's sound, if a bit terrifying, but we have to live in the real world. We're not monks living in the desert. We have bills, mortgages, kids who want braces, cars that break down. So Section 5 is about practical spirituality. How do we live this today without becoming homeless ourselves?
And this is where Saint Josemaria Escrivá is incredibly helpful. He was a modern saint. He lived in the 20th century. He wasn't preaching to monks. He was preaching to lawyers, engineers, moms, and dads. He knew all about mortgages.
He uses an engineering metaphor that I think is really, really helpful. The muelle.
The coil, or the spring. Imagine a steel spring. For a spring to have power, to be able to jump up or launch something, what state does it need to be in?
It has to be compressed, pushed down.
Right. If the spring is fully extended, loose, just kind of flopping around, it has no potential energy, it can't do any work. Escrivá says that for a regular person living in the world, poverty isn't about being destitute, it's about compression.
So limiting yourself intentionally?
Yes. If you indulge every single whim, if you buy every new gadget you want, eat at the finest restaurants every night, upgrade your car every 2 years, your spring is loose. You're completely extended out into the world. You have no spiritual elasticity, no power.
So the discipline of saying no to yourself, even to good things, is what creates the power to jump towards God.
Exactly. It's about internal detachment. He suggests you don't have to be destitute, but you should feel the pinch occasionally. Maybe you drive the car for 10 years instead of 3. Maybe you skip the expensive vacation 1 year and give the money away. You compress your lifestyle to maintain spiritual power.
But that's so hard because of social pressure. He talks about something called santa desvergüenza.
Holy shamelessness, which is the perfect antidote to keeping up with the Joneses.
Which is pretty much the driving force of our entire consumer economy.
It is. We spend money, we don't have to buy things we don't need to impress people we don't even like. Escrivá says you need holy shamelessness. You need to be bold enough to say, no, I'm not buying that, or yes, this is my old coat, and be totally, completely at peace with it.
Because your validation comes from God, not from your neighbor's opinion of your car.
And that is true freedom. It's the freedom to be unimpressive by worldly standards so that you can be impressive by eternal standards.
There's a story from St. Alphonsus Liguori that really drives home this danger of trading the spiritual for the material. It's the story of the sorcerer. I think we should tell this one fully because it really does play out like a movie scene.
It does. Liguori tells the story of a young man. Let's call him Paolo. Paolo is living in desperate poverty. He's talented, he's ambitious, but he's just flat broke. And he's bitter about it.
He feels like life has cheated him.
Completely. And in his desperation, he seeks out a wizard, a sorcerer who is known to have dark powers. He finds him in some cave or a dark tower. The setting is classic folklore. And Paolo begs him, make me rich, I'll do anything.
The classic deal with the devil.
Exactly. The wizard looks at him and says, I can give you mountains of gold, but there is a price. You must renounce your allegiance to God.
And then Paolo.
Paolo is so desperate, so hungry for the gold that he says, fine, I renounce God. He writes it down on a piece of parchment. But the wizard just shakes his head. He says, that's not enough. To truly belong to the darkness, you must also renounce Mary.
Now, Liguori was very Marian, so for him, this is the ultimate test.
It is, and Paolo freezes. He thinks about his mother. He thinks about the prayers he said as a child. He suddenly realizes that if he renounces his spiritual mother, he will be truly, utterly alone in the universe. He looks at the promise of gold, and he looks at the absolute emptiness of that renunciation, and something just snaps inside him.
He realizes the exchange rate is terrible.
He realizes it's a total scam. He realizes that his faith, even in his poverty, is a treasure that all the gold in the world cannot replace. He screams, no, and runs out of the cave.
What's the takeaway there? I mean, aside from don't talk to wizards.
The takeaway is that we are all Talo. Every day we are offered these little deals. Cheat on this tax form and get more money. Ignore your family to work this weekend and get the bonus. Sell your integrity for a promotion. We are constantly being asked to renounce a little bit of God for a little bit of gold. Ligori wants us to have that moment of clarity that Paolo had. It's a bad deal. Don't sign the paper.
Let's move to the deep end of the pool now. Section 6, the mystical view. We're talking St. John of the Cross and St. Teresa of Avila. These two are the absolute heavyweights of the interior life.
They are. And they shift the metaphor from commerce and investment to physics. St. John of the Cross talks about the ascent of Mount Carmel. He views the spiritual life as climbing a very high, very steep mountain to meet God at the summit.
And anyone who's ever climbed a mountain knows, weight matters.
Every single ounce matters. And John of the Cross is ruthless about this. He says you cannot reach the summit of union with God if you are weighed down by attachments. And here's the really scary part. He says it doesn't matter if you are tied down by a heavy gold chain or by a single thin thread.
Wait, really? A thread?
He uses the image of a bird. If a bird is tied to a rock by a thick rope, it can't fly. That's obvious. But if it's tied by a thin silk thread, it still can't fly.
So it doesn't matter if I'm attached to $1 billion or if I'm just obsessively attached to my collection of, I don't know, vintage sneakers.
If that attachment keeps you from doing God's will, if it grounds you when God wants you to fly, then you're stuck. The thread is just as effective as the chain in preventing flight. He's calling for total detachment. Not necessarily owning nothing, but needing nothing.
But doesn't that just make life miserable, giving up everything you love?
And that's the great paradox. John of the Cross claims that the detached person is actually happier and enjoys things more than the attached person.
How does that even work?
Think about the thorns again. The attached person is anxious. They're eating a delicious meal, but they're worried about the cost of the bill, or worried about their cholesterol, or worried about looking impressive to their dinner guests. They're gnawing on the rind of the fruit. The detached person, they sit down, they say grace, and they simply enjoy the meal as a pure gift from God. They taste the meat of the fruit because they aren't afraid of losing it. They hold it lightly so they can actually feel it.
St. Teresa of Avila has a very, let's say, earthy way of describing money.
If she does, she pulls no punches whatsoever. She calls money manure, yes. And she implies that, like, manure, it has a purpose. If you spread it out, if you give it away generously, it fertilizes the fields, it makes good things grow. But if you pile it all up in a heap in your living room...
It stinks. It's disgusting.
It stinks, it rots, and it brings disease. It's a perfect agricultural metaphor. Wealth is fertilizer. Use it or it becomes toxic.
She also uses the guest concept, which I love.
Yes. She says we are like travelers staying for a night in an inn. We are guests in this life.
That resonates so much. You don't own the furniture in a hotel room.
Exactly. Imagine checking into a hotel and immediately stressing out because you don't own the bed, or trying to bolt the TV to your chest to take it with you when you check out. It's complete madness. You use the bed to sleep, you enjoy the shower, and then you leave it all behind. Teresa says we need to view our entire lives, our houses, our 401ks, our cars, as hotel furniture. It's useful for the night, but it's not ours to keep.
So let's try to bring this all together. We've covered a lot of ground, from the legal arguments of Augustine to the mountaintops of St. John. If we had to recap the three main pillars of this entire deep dive, what would they be?
Okay, pillar number 1, I would say, is the thorns. Money causes anxiety. It pricks you when you try to get it. It bleeds you when you try to keep it, and it chokes your spiritual life. It is not inherently evil, but it is dangerous radioactive material.
Got it. Pillar number 2.
Pillar number 2. The social mortgage, superfluous wealth, that which is beyond your dignified need belongs to the poor. Holding on to it when others are dying of need is not just stinginess, the saints call it theft, it is a matter of justice, not charity. You are returning a lost wallet.
And the third pillar?
Pillar number 3, the investment. Almsgiving, giving to the poor, is the only way to actually keep your wealth forever. You have to transfer the currency to the bank of heaven. You can't take it with you, but you can and must send it ahead for that guaranteed 100-fold return.
It really shifts the entire perspective from giving is losing to giving is saving.
Completely. It turns generosity into the ultimate act of enlightened self-interest in the highest possible sense.
I want to leave the listener with one final thought.
Yeah.
We started with the idea of the coat in the closet, but there's another image from St. John Chrysostom that I think is the perfect way to close. It's about the king's palace.
It's a haunting image. Chrysostom poses a challenge, he says. Imagine a great king invited you to live in his magnificent palace forever. But there is just one rule. You cannot bring any outside currency, no copper coins, into the throne room. It is forbidden.
Okay, so if I were standing at the palace gate and I had a pocket full of pennies, what would I do?
You would drop them immediately. You wouldn't even think twice about it. You would empty your pockets, throw the copper in the dirt, and run into the palace. You wouldn't stand there and say, oh, but I worked so hard for these pennies. You would see them as worthless trash compared to the splendor of the palace.
And Chrysostom's point is,
He says, the King of Heaven has told you exactly that. You cannot bring this money into the kingdom. It's not legal tender there. So why are we all standing at the door, clutching our pennies, refusing to go in? Why are we choosing the copper over the crown?
that is the question we're going to leave you with. Check your spiritual pockets this week. See what you're holding on to, that coat, that extra bit in the savings account you don't really need, that fear of letting go. And maybe, just maybe, try dropping a few coins and see if you don't feel a whole lot lighter.
It's the best investment you will ever make.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.